Okay, what are we reading about? We're reading about the preparation for the Exodus. The Jewish people are in Egypt. Nine of the plagues occurred. They're preparing for the 10th plague, which was midnight of the first night of Passover. But finally, God says, okay, you have to prepare. And how do you prepare? So there's a whole list of instructions. And essentially, it's the idea of the Pesach offering, which we started talking about the last couple of weeks, what it represents and why this is critically important for the Jewish people, for the emerging Jewish people to think about themselves in the context of this Pesach offering. And we talked about um, some of the laws. They would have to slaughter the animal. Well, take it 2 weeks early. Take it 4 days before they actually offer it. They have to take it and designate it. And then when the 15th of past when the 14th of Nisan comes, they would slaughter, put the blood on the doorposts and the lintel, and they have to be inside for the whole night. And that's how they'll be protected from the mashchit, the destructive force, which is the plague of the firstborn. We discussed that a little bit. We discussed some of the symbolisms, and we continue to because there's a lot of symbolism here. Um, where should we start? We'll start from here. It is a very interesting Pesach offering. A Pesach offering is a very interesting offering. And the reason why it's so interesting is it defies categorization. We didn't get into the book of offerings yet, which is the third book of the Torah. When we get there, we'll read about all the different types of offerings. There are many different types with many different laws and many different details. But if you really want to generalize, and there's generally basically two different categories of offerings. There is the individual offerings and communal offerings. How do they differ? The communal offerings are brought one offering on behalf of the entire community. And later we read that there was actually two every day, one in the morning, one at night, and then one in the afternoon, I should say. And then on Shabbat, there were additional offerings. And on holidays, there were additional offerings, which is called Musaf, which is additional. That's why every day today we don't have offerings. So we have prayers replacing the offerings. So on Shabbat, we have Musaf, additional prayers to commemorate the additional offerings. But the point is, I don't have to worry about bringing those offerings because they're brought collectively on behalf of the entire people. What do I have to do? So we read about it yesterday in the second Torah, because yesterday we took out two Torahs. All I have to do, it's actually a pretty good deal. You have to give a half a coin, 50 cents. Well, it wasn't really 50 cents because it's a half a silver coin. Today, silver is expensive. What is it, $100 an ounce? Whatever. If it's a few dollars, $50, $40, $79 an ounce, it went down. Okay, fine. I'm happy you're here. You can just set me straight. I don't know exactly what an ounce is because the Torah tells us exactly the weight. 20 gera is a shekel, half a shekel is 10 gera. I don't know what a gera is. Maybe we'll ask AI to calculate, but it's a few dollars. For a few dollars, you pay a few dollars, and then you give a half a coin. You give a half of the small, you give a half a coin. Can't be that expensive. And then they collect half a coins from everybody, and then and with that money they bring they bring the collective the communal offerings. That's one category. Now, those communal offerings are very regulated. They have to be brought at a certain time and a certain amount of offerings. So that's one class. Then there's another category of offerings, which is basically individual offerings. You bring it when you want. There's no obligation. Well, there could be an obligation. Let's say there's a sin offering. If I sin, I bring an offering. If I want to give, I could bring a Thanksgiving offering. I could bring an offering just because I want to come close to God. It's individual, but the individual offerings, it's not regulated what time to bring it and when to bring it. It's up to the individual. Okay, so these are the two categories: Tzibur, communal offerings, and individual offerings. Now you get to the Pesach offering and try to fit the Pesach offering into one of these categories. And it's very difficult because on one hand, everybody has to bring the offering at the same time. So sounds very much like a collective communal offering. On the other hand, every individual has to bring their own. Well, not individual, but we'll see in a minute. You have to be subscribed to an offering. Every group, every family brings an offering, but you have to be subscribed. And you're going to have to eat a piece. And how many people subscribe to an offering, depending on how many people can eat the animal. And the Torah talks about this, that you have to actually be subscribed. So now you're going to say, so every individual has like a subscription. That's not like the communal offerings. Communal offerings is one for everybody. It's not like the individual offerings, because individual offerings you bring whenever you want. It's not regulated to bring at a specific time. And the Pesach offering is basically a hybrid of communal and individual. Everybody brings it, but there's a place for everybody. Everyone has a name. Everyone has a subscription. Now, that sounds like a technicality, but the Hasidic commentaries explain it's not a technicality at all. This is critical to understand to understand ourselves as people, because when you talk about political philosophies, there's basically two ways to think about nations, and we're talking about the birth of a nation. One way is to think about the collective, and there are countries that are based on collectivism. Then there are the other extreme. There are countries that are based on individualism. And in countries that are based on individualism, sometimes you will sacrifice the benefit of the community for the rights of the individual, because they care more about individual rights. Other countries based on collectivism, they'll sacrifice the individual for the community, right? And what does Torah say? Well, there's elements of both, but at the offering which represents the birth of our nation, what we're saying is we do both. We're not taking a side on this question. There is communal and there's individual, but the communal cannot erase the individual. And that's why, even in the communal offering, the purpose of the community is to protect the individual. And that's the philosophical point and political point. But there are examples in halacha that express this point. I'll just give one, then we'll take your doctor's question. So, for example, there's a law in the Talmud that says that if people, let's say it unfortunately happened in history, let's say you have evil people that come to a group of Jews and they say, give us one Jew and we'll kill that Jew. And if you don't give us one, we'll kill all 10. Right? So if you look at the collective, you could say, well, it's better to sacrifice one than to save 9. That's the logical perspective. It's also utilitarian, but it's also logical. You have to protect the group. If you have to sacrifice an individual, so be it. But the Jewish law says, no, you cannot sacrifice one to save many. And that comes to the point that we're not going to sacrifice one for the, so we do have the concept of collectivism. We have charity. We have care for the community. That's important. But we also have the community doesn't erase the individual. And that's why the Pesach offering, which is the founding offering of our people, that's when we become a people. We discussed that last time we spoke. The birth of our people is the moment of the Exodus. So the sacrifice that we offer expresses this truth. Is it a collective offering? Is it a communal offering? Or is it an individual offering? The answer is it's both. So we can elaborate upon that. But go ahead, doctor, please.
Rabbi, you made a very interesting little point in passing, which may be obvious to others, but suddenly stood out to me. You said if you want to draw closer to God, you may choose to make a sacrifice. So often people think of a sacrifice in terms of giving up rather than drawing closer. So my question is this: is the Hebrew word for sacrifice something that involves the concept of drawing closer, or does it involve the issue of giving up? Because
so if you had to guess, what would you guess?
I would hope it had to do with drawing closer.
Yes, the Hebrew word for sacrifice has nothing to do with sacrifice. Sacrifice, I would imagine, I'm not a scholar, but I think that sacrifice is a Christian term. In other words, we're living in a surrounding culture, and a lot of the way we think about Judaism is influenced by the broader culture. But the reality is, if you think about Judaism on its own terms, then you see that there's a lot of infiltration, and even the way we think about it, we have to work hard to think of Judaism on our own terms. And sacrifice is a very good example, because the Hebrew word for sacrifice is not sacrifice. As you point out, sacrifice represents giving up of yourself, as if God it was happier if I have to sacrifice of myself or give up of myself, as if that's the point or that's the emphasis. The reality is that in Hebrew, the word for what we call sacrifice is korban, and korban simply means coming close. So it's a whole different story. It's like saying, well, I have to sacrifice for my wife, so I'm going to go and pay $20 and buy her flowers. That's not, you missed the whole point. Yes, you're spending $20, but the point is not that you sacrifice. The point is that you feel that you're drawing close, right? So it's the same. You're spending money, but do you look at it as a sacrifice? Or you look at it as an act of closeness. So we look at it as an act of closeness. So it's a korban. Yes. So that's a very good point. And of course, yes. So the answer is you're right that Hebrew has its own term and it means korban, it means drawing close. But once you talk about the specifics of what's the purpose of the offering, that's why I like that you call it offering or drawing close doesn't mean anything, but offering is at least not sacrifice. But in Hebrew, it's korban, it's coming close. But so we'll use offering. If I say sacrifice and I slip, I apologize in advance. It's not a sacrifice. Um, but the point is thinking about the Pesach offering as collective versus individual. That is very interesting, and we're going to say it's both. So there is a collective. We do care about the community. Community is very important to Judaism, and you'll see it in this specific story. But it's also the idea that what is a community? Community is a collection of individuals. So if you're going to wipe out the right of the individual, then the community falls apart. So the community is here to protect the individual. So there's both. Sometimes we um, honor the community and we say the individual should share, the individual should give of himself for the community. But when it comes to the other matters, you cannot sacrifice the individual for the community. And like I said, that case, that story, that law is an example. But the point here is that's why, if you think about this, it's actually very unique that every offering that we have in the Torah, we have many, would fall into either the collective, either communal offering or individual offering. But the Pesach offering, which is the founding of our people, does not fall into any of those categories. It's both. If it's both, why is it both? Because this is how we think of ourselves as a people. This is not just a specific offering. This is the offering that is associated with our birth as a people. So we're not going to put ourselves in one of those two categories. So that's something we can elaborate upon. But I think for now, something to think about. Go ahead, Vicky, please.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. As we're discussing the birth of the people, right, and how the nations is formed, we also like look at the priorities, right? So what it says in this Torah portion that we're reading, it starts with the father's house. So it starts with the family. So the foundation is the family, and then if it's and then you go to the neighbor. So the priority is the family, and then somebody who lives closer, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's an interesting point. You talk about when you talk about charity and the obligation to give charity. So for some reason, not for some reason, there are people who like to think about charity and they like to think they have very smart people. They want to give charity, so they do research and they figure out to create a foundation, figure out where can I be most effective. And sometimes they feel that the way to think about charity is where can I be most effective with my few dollars? And that's one way to think about it. And in some ways, you go to the most impoverished places in the world, and then with a few dollars, you can make the biggest difference, right? So if you're going to places where people don't have clean water, or they don't have, I don't know, nets for protecting from mosquitoes. So with a few dollars, you could really make a difference in people's lives. And I'm not negating that way of thinking, but that's a legitimate way of thinking. But in Judaism, there's also a way of thinking that says that, I guess in English you say charity begins at home, but it's the person closer to you. You have more obligation to the person closer to you than to a distant person. So if somebody says, I'm helping people on the other side of the world, but my neighbor is starving and I'm not going to help my neighbor, for Judaism, that's a problem because the person closer to you means you have more responsibility for them. And as family members, even so, someone says, my family member is parent for sure. That's the other obligation of honoring parents. But if someone says, so there is a concept in Judaism that the closer the person is to you, like even the poor people of your city precede the poor people of a different city. And then also there's actually a verse in Proverbs from King Solomon who says it's better a close neighbor than a distant brother. In other words, in a way, you can have someone that is a brother very close to me, but if he's living on the other side of the world, then that relationship is not gonna impact your life as much as your neighbor, right? So invest in neighboral relationships. So there is a concept of starting with family and moving to starting with family and moving to neighbor, and then sort of circling out. Not to say that all your money has to be distributed this way, but it's a counter to the concept is I'm going to give, I'm going to give where my money can be the most effective or where I feel the best about it. And then, but then you get to a perverse reality where the person down the street doesn't have food. It just doesn't, it for Judaism that doesn't sit right. So that's indeed these verses allude to that as well.
But do they contribute equally to purchasing this lamb? Like the neighbors and the
Not
family?
necessarily to purchase, but you have to subscribe. The Hebrew word, you have to be manu, you have to be counted. In other words, you cannot offering. The problem part of the Pesach offering is that it has to be built, it has to be eaten, and you can't leave it over. So you're not allowed to offer the offering until you know who is going to be subscribed to this offering and who is going to eat of it and who's going to finish it. And if you open up Tractate Psachim, the Tractate of Passover in the Talmud, there's like 3 chapters out of 10 chapters. There's like 3 chapters, maybe 2, maybe 1, but there's a lot of laws. I don't remember exactly how many chapters, but certainly 1 full chapter, maybe even 2 full chapters about mess ups where people thought they were subscribed to one offering and they were subscribed to another offering. And what do you do? And then do you have to bring the second Passover in a month? Because basically, if you're not subscribed, you're subscribed to 2, it's invalid. And you get all kinds of cases. What happens? A woman, the first year she got married, her husband thought he's coming to her Seder. Her father thought she's coming to her Seder. You go to mother-in-law, so both their in-laws and your parents bring the offering and have you in mind. What do? Crisis. The point is you don't have to pay, but you have to be subscribed to an offering. They have to know this is your piece. So just because so in some ways it's like a collective offering, but on the other hand, no, it's for you. You have a name, you have a subscription. You're part. It's not just a collective, but the collective is a collection of many individuals. So you have to be subscribed. And if you can look at you read the Pesach, you read the Mishnah and the Talmud in Tractate Psachim, it's like who cares? So big deal. So 2 people subscribed for you. Big deal. Who cares? Why are you spending so much intellectual energy to solve these problems? And the answer is because it matters. The Torah is signaling to you that you're not just a number part of a big group. You matter. When we bring this Pesach offering, when we're going to renew our founding as a people, you have to feel that there is a place where you have a name. So you come to an event, and some events they say, okay, we're not going to subscribe. So what do you call it?
Okay.
Set seating. The problem. So the reason why people do no set seating because to make seating is a nightmare. Right? It's a nightmare. Who wants to make seating? He talks to her. She doesn't talk to him. She's offended by him. They're both wearing the same dress. Forget about it. It's an absolute nightmare. On the other hand, if I come to a place and I know that there's a name that says my name and I'm supposed to sit somewhere, I feel like I matter. I feel like I'm not just part of something bigger. Someone thought about me. Someone wrote my name down. Now, could you imagine if I come to an event and it says my name twice? Which table do I sit on? Identity crisis. This is a joke, right? Or it doesn't say my name at all. So these things matter. In other words, so it doesn't really matter when you're coming to an event. But if you're coming to the Jewish people and say, how does God see me? How do I see myself as part of the collective of the Jewish people? I need to know I have a place. I matter. I'm part of an offering. This offering is incomplete without me. So it's critical. Now, you just learn the law. It sounds very technical and not important. But psychologically, this is critical. Your kid has to feel, and you have to feel, that you matter. And Judaism would not be the same without you. And the collective would not be the same if you were not here. That's a very powerful message. In fact, there's probably no more powerful message than that. Right? If you think about what's the most powerful thing I could teach my children about Judaism, that there's a seat for you by the table, and if you're not here, we're missing you. Okay, what could be more powerful than that? You matter, you need it. Now, Rabbi Manas Friedman was here on Shabbos, and he said all kinds of things. Some I remember, some I don't. At my age, I don't remember everything. But he said something interesting that I remember because it was a little caught my attention. He said, it's much more important to be needed than to be loved. Okay, something to think about. But you're needed. We need you. We have a place. Someone has to eat this. You got to be here. So in a way, this is not just technical. Oh, where am I going to go for the Pesach offering? I subscribe to 2. All these technical problems are really addressing a very important point. The point is, just because we're talking about the collective Jewish people leaving Egypt, we didn't forget about you as an individual.
And also how the society is formed, but the family is
So that's how the society is formed. Is that's the most. Now, sometimes there's room for the collective. Sometimes there's room for the individual, but the moment of the birth, meaning what is the philosophical foundation of the society, is that it's both. And that's why in some cases we say we believe in, I don't know if collectivism is the right word because it's already too political, but we believe in the individual transcending the self and caring for others. And that's an important part of our community or our peoplehood. On the other hand, we're not going to get to a point where you could sacrifice the individual, because the community is here to allow every individual to grow, not to destroy and break the individual. And that's why we would never sacrifice the individual. That law, that's an extreme case, but that law is telling that you're not allowed to sacrifice one, even to save 100, even to save 1,000, even to save 1,000,000. It doesn't matter. It's the same point. Every individual is infinite. And if you talk about it philosophically, I don't know, mathematically, I guess it's the same. But if you talk about, if you say 10 infinities is more than one infinity, then you're not really infinity. Then it's not really infinite. If you really believe that every person has an infinite value, then 10 people and one people are the same. You can't differentiate because it's infinity. Infinity, all numbers break down. So it's not utilitarian and it's maybe not logical, but that's what we believe. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Tamarin, please.
I'd like to ask you two things. One, picking up what you just said about Rabbi Friedman, or
Yeah.
Friedman said yesterday, and then another question. In terms of what Rabbi Friedman said, in an Orthodox family, since being needed is more important than being loved, at a fairly early age, is it inculcated into the children that certain areas where they are indeed needed, so that they begin to define their identity in terms of not my mother or father loves me, but where they need me? And that if a child feels that they're really needed, that in a sense it has a profound effect on their self-esteem. What's your thought about that from a Judaic, Kabbalistic perspective?
I would say it's not just so much parents, but it's more about even greater than that. So when a child is very young, if you're growing up in a traditional Orthodox family, you introduce all kinds of religious acts. So you have to say a blessing before you eat. You have to wash your hands in the morning and you have to pray. But what are you telling the child? Why do you have to say a blessing before you eat, right? Why do you have to pray or do any mitzvah? So this is a very profound idea, and theologically, it's you have to unpack it, and we can talk about this literally forever. But the feeling that the kid is getting at age 2, at age 3, at age 4, is that I don't know if need is the perfect word. Is that in a way, if you want to simplify, it's not accurate, but if you want to simplify, because with children, everything has to be simplified, even though it's not theologically accurate 100%. You have to fine tune it as you get older, but very simple. What happens to a 4-year-old that says, God needs me? God needs me to say this blessing. Okay, think about this for a second. What does that do for you? Right? So it's not a question, does he love me? Does he hate me? I'm just saying, just the concept. If part of the ingredients is God needs you to say this blessing, it's a small act, but God needs you because you make a difference. So even the subtle,
it brings you closer.
brings
If
you
the idea is
closer.
if you say God loves you, it doesn't necessarily bring you closer. God
God,
needs you, brings you
it
closer.
brings you closer, but also you matter. You talk about self-esteem, you matter, right? The most empowering thing you can give me. If you love me, it doesn't say anything about me. It says something about you.
Right.
You love me. Very nice. I'm very happy that you love me. But you could love me and I could hate myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's not uncommon,
Right.
right? I say I hate myself. So someone who loves me says, "But I love you." Mazel tov. So good for you. So I go to the shrink and you go to the, you go have dinner. The point is, it doesn't help me that you love me, right? But if I matter, then that's my value. That's my self-esteem. So Rabbi Friedman talks about the fact that he says all these stories. I don't know which ones are true, which ones are not true, but there was a rabbi who said, what did he say? I forget the thing. He says, all the stories I make up are true because I make them up. It didn't really happen, but it's still true. True means the concept is true. So all the stories you make up. So the point is this. The point is, he says he once goes to the kid doesn't want to do anything. Kid's depressed, doesn't want to do anything. So he has this whole spiel. But basically, there was a clergyman who came before him and he tried to influence him, and he said, "God loves you." The kid didn't care, and then the Manas Friedman said he basically said, "You got to put on tefillin or whatever." He said, "Why?" He says, "God needs you." He said, "Okay, I'm willing to listen." Right? So God loves me. So that's God's problem. What doesn't mean I have to get out of bed. So the concept that you're not just part of a collective. Oh, there's collective for 15 million Jews now. They're all going to go to Passover Seder. No, this Passover Seder cannot be brought unless your name is on it. Okay, that's a different message.
Rabbi, the second question is this. You've talked about the idea of giving a korban, not only drawing closer to God, but closer to other people, but being closer to yourself. And here's my question. Do you draw closer to yourself by giving yourself a piece of cake, or do you draw yourself closer to yourself by refusing to have a piece of cake because you feel that somehow that's a higher value? So we're talking about the role of sacrifice in a way in drawing closer. And so many people feel the way to feel good about themselves is to give themselves something. And perhaps what you're suggesting is quite the opposite.
Well, that's a good question. How do you draw close to self? The way you draw close to self, I would say, is reveal the inner layers of self, right? You think about what do I want? So there's layers. There's external, there's short-term desires, short-term pleasure, and then there are things that are more meaningful to me, but sometimes you don't always sense them. You have to go deeper and deeper. So I would say that the way to draw close to yourself is to ask myself, what do I really want? So I want some ice cream. Okay, let's say I had the ice cream. What do I really want, right? So when you ask yourself what do you really want and you go deeper and deeper, that's drawing close to self. Now, I have no problem with ice cream or a piece of chocolate. It's not a bad thing. I'm having a Coke, what do they call this? Coffee. So there's nothing wrong. Giving yourself could go either way. In other words, you can indulge in a pleasure, but that's serving your external desires. But you can also use it to bring you close to yourself and to people. Depends how you use it is the short answer, right? It depends. It's everything. It depends how you use it. And are you using it for what purpose? And you're going to say, I'm going to eat a piece of chocolate so I can feel good, so I can now go do a task which is very difficult for me to do. And I'm going to have to do it because it's beneficial for me, but I need that motivation. And for me, having a piece of chocolate motivates me. If that's the case, then that's bringing you closer to your core values, and that's okay. And that's not only okay, that's good. But if I say I have a piece of chocolate and that brings me down, that makes me more materialistic and makes me just want more and more, and it's actually moving me away from my goals, then obviously this is not bringing me close to self. So I don't think there's things that are inherently good or bad. Most of the world is neutral in the sense that it could either bring you closer to your own values and to your own self, or move you farther away, depending on how you use it. So that's what I would say.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's read a few verses and we'll get to the idea of the shearing and the naming of the offering, and we'll talk a little bit about this. Okay, so if you look at let's look at verse 3. So chapter 12, verse 3, in the ArtScroll, it's page 351. On the screen, it's right here. So God, again, this is God speaking to Moshe on the first of Nisan, which is 15 days, 14 days before they would bring the offering, and 15 days before the Exodus. The verse reads as follows. So this is the introductory verses we discussed to create the new moon, this month. That's the new calendar. We spent a lot of time on that. Now we go to verse 3. Speak to the entire community of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, let each one take a lamb for each parental home, okay? A lamb for each household. This makes sense. Every family, we're a very family-oriented religion. Every family has an offering. What happens if your whole family cannot eat, one family cannot eat a whole sheep, right? You have to eat a whole sheep in a whole night. I don't know how many people can eat a sheep. Well, that's ChatGPT. But remember, it's not the only thing you're eating. You also have to eat matzah. You have to eat bitter herbs, right? It's like when you go to the restaurant and you order, and then they give you the bread, and by the time you finish eating the bread, it can't eat any of the meat. It's a crisis, right? So here you have to eat matzah, and you have to eat bitter herbs and a piece of lamb. So I have a few people in my family. We can't eat a full family. So what do you do? So now we have a solution in verse 4. What's the solution? In verse 4, the solution is, but if, excuse me, first we explain the problem. But if the household is too small for a lamb, then he and his neighbor who is nearest to his house, that's the idea, neighbor who is nearest to your house, start with the person closest to you, right? The neighbor nearest to his house shall take one according to the number of people, each one according to one's ability to eat, shall be counted for the lamb. So if your house is too small, no problem, invite your neighbors. And by the way, if you invite them, they would have to actually eat the offering together with you, and they actually have to stay in the home for that whole night with you. So it's not just you're going to send them Uber Eats and send them the piece of meat. You're actually celebrating the Passover Seder together. Okay, so now, and again, it depends how many people. When there's no exact regulation, because some people eat more, some people eat less. So it's very specific. Okay, so that's the verses that we want to think about for a moment. So there's a beautiful commentary by Rabbi Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, and he says something very interesting, which is actually, which is it's actually interesting. So usually, when you think about sharing, say, why do you share? Why is it a value to give charity? Why is it a value to help others, to share, to give, to write a check? Usually, the underlying problem or the underlying cause for this value is that somebody else is missing. Right? Think about this. If everyone had what they need, there's no reason to give charity. There's no reason to share. The problem is there's poverty. Poverty is either monetary poverty or other forms of poverty. Somebody is missing. Someone's lonely. So I have to invite them. Why do I have to invite them? Because they're lonely, right? So in other words, one way to think about this is because there is a need, that's why the person who has whatever they have time, they have talents, they have money, whatever it is, because there's a need, the people who have should share to fill the need. So the motivation or the logic, what's the word I'm looking for? Can't think of the word. The logic behind sharing is that there's a need. Now look at verse 3. Verse 3 and 4. Here you're with your family, but you have to include others. But what is the rationale? That's the word I'm looking for. What's the rationale of the sharing? The rationale is not your neighbor cannot afford the sheep. That's not the rationale. The rationale is very interesting. If the household is too small for the lamb, the problem is that we have a problem. The people who have the lamb, we have too much. Not too much. The problem is we have a problem. So we need the neighbor to come to our house. Now, what happens if you think about charity in that sense? Charity is not so much because my neighbor needs. Maybe they need, maybe they don't. We don't even, doesn't even say anything about the neighbor. We have no idea. Do they have their own sheep? Maybe yeah, maybe no. Who's doing the favor? Who? Right? Is it the person who has the sheep or the person who doesn't have the sheep but the person who has the sheep cannot fulfill their obligation until they get somebody else to share to because we have to finish the whole offering. So in other words, we're shifting that when you talk about sharing, we're shifting the focus from the need and shifting it to the person who's giving and saying, what's going to make you, we are a people that you're not a family, you're part of a nation, you're part of a collective. And the root of the collective, why do I have to be part of a collective? Why do I have to connect to others? Not because somebody is missing, because it's a benefit for myself. And that opens up a whole new thing about transcendence. That for me to become transcendent, for me to go connect to Hashem, for me to go beyond the self, I need the other person. So it's not that I need the other person for them. I need the other person. In other words, it's not the benefit is, the rationale is the other person doesn't have the other person doesn't have a sheep to bring the Pesach offering, so therefore I'm going to be kind, I'm going to invite them. No, the whole idea of Pesach offering, of freedom, is transcending the ego, going beyond the self. That makes me free. So when I give to somebody else, that's actually a spiritual exercise for myself. That makes me free. We could talk about that. We'll elaborate upon that. I need to give so I could become free. And that's again, the founding offering. All these messages are not just details. These messages are critical to understand what is the Jewish people. The idea is, what is freedom? That freedom is I transcend self. I give to others. And I give to others not because they are missing, because I am missing. I'm missing the opportunity to give. And therefore, I have to give. So we talk about giving and we don't mention anything about the neighbor. It doesn't matter. It doesn't say they're poor. It doesn't mean they don't have. They can have 10 sheep, but they have to do me a favor. But the point is, the reason why I'm giving is because there's not enough people for me to eat. So I have to give almost like I have too much, quote unquote. So it's a totally different perspective, and I'm going to elaborate upon it in a minute, God willing. But in the meantime, Vicky, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Rabbi. This is a beautiful idea which continues our discussion about how we feel needed. So even if you have money, but your neighbor has extra, then you subscribe to that. But I was just wondering if that has anything to do with the decision making, whether you want to put a blood on the doorpost, or whether you want to stay or go. Let's say your neighbor wants to go and you are kind of on the fence.
Then you're not bringing a Pesach offering, right? We're talking about people who want to leave, but we have to do it together. Can't leave alone. We'll talk about that. I'm going to elaborate upon that in a minute. Elaborate. Go ahead, Dr. Tamarin.
Rabbi, thank you for giving a totally different perspective on freedom than any I've really heard before. And that is as follows. A slave in Egypt, a Jewish slave in Egypt, who gives to another slave is freer than after we leave Egypt if somebody's just selfish. Is that
100%.
correct? Okay.
100%. We'll talk
That's a concept I never thought of before.
Okay, that's critical to the whole idea of matzah, which is coming now, and it's critical to our understanding of this whole chapter. Yes, and to the Passover Seder. Freedom is also spiritual freedom, and the biggest oppressor is the ego, the idea that I'm only thinking about self, and to the extent that I transcend the self, I'm breaking out of my own inner Egypt. But we'll elaborate upon that. So to elaborate upon that, I want to just go to yesterday's reading. Yesterday's reading, we read about, again, remember I said I have to give a half coin. We talked about this, a half coin. So it's Sunday, so let me talk about this for 10 seconds. And also we had yesterday, you remember, we had a chassan, a groom who got an aliyah, got called up to the Torah, and so we'll talk how this connects to marriage. But you remember Amy Hannah? She used to come on Sunday. Her son's getting married. Very nice. Yeah. Remember Amy? You remember Amy? Yeah. Timmy. Yeah.
So she's the redhead.
Is she red or is she blonde? What? She's red? Okay. Yeah. The consensus is that we have a majority that say she's red. Okay, good.
She's a communist.
So let's think about this for a second. Torah, almost always you have to do something complete. Almost never do you give half. Like, for example, let's say it's Friday. Let's say you have to make a blessing on 2 loaves of bread. So what do? You have to make a blessing on the loaf that's tastier. So if you have 1 loaf that's wheat and the other one is barley, you make a blessing on the wheat because it tastes better, assuming it tastes better. But then you get into run into other problems. What happens if the wheat is sliced and the barley is complete? Oh, you have to make a blessing on a complete. Almost always we look for complete. Everything has to be, for God, it has to be complete. This is the only mitzvah that you have to give half. You cannot give wealthy, you can't give more. Everybody has to give half. And all the commentators, going back 2,000 years or 3,000 years, everybody has something to say about this half. And the Hasidic interpretation is very beautiful. And it relates. So it starts, a shekel is 20 gera, which is a certain weight, and you have to give 10. Now, 10 is a complete number. In the Kabbalah, 10 is a complete number. There are 10 sfirot, and the individual has 10 character traits, 7 emotional, 3 intellectual. So 10 is a complete state. But we say, your 10 is only half. And in short, what we're saying here is that when a person matures, a person realizes that your complete personality is only half. Who's your other half? You need to go beyond the self to become complete. And beyond the self could be God. That's one interpretation. Who's the other half is God. But it's also another person. Or certainly a spouse is the other half. So how do you get married? You get married, you say, I'm so perfect. I'm so perfect. So you have 2 perfect people getting in the same room together. Forget it. It's never going to work. It's never going to work, right? You have 2 people, each one coming with their own full personality, their own developed personality. They're all ready. They're complete. They're developed. They're mature. But what is true maturity? True maturity is realizing I'm only half. See what I'm saying? Realizing that I can't just have a sheep for my family. There's somebody else can give me something that I don't have. And connecting to somebody else, going beyond the self and connecting to someone else is what truly makes me complete. So by being half, you're complete. If you run around the world thinking I'm complete, so then you're in trouble. And then you're not going to be able to connect to other people, not to God, not to your spouse, not to anybody. And you yourself are in denial, right? So this is the paradox of the half shekel. The paradox of the half shekel is that the greatest maturity is realizing that you're only half. And something else outside of you is going to make you whole. Go ahead.
For the Pidyon Haben, we also do a half shekel.
No, 5 shekalim. That's a different. That's you 5 shekalim, and that's whole. That's 5 complete pieces of silver. Why 5 is another story. Maybe we'll talk about it later when we get to later on this parsha, because Pidyon Haben is also the commemoration of the Exodus. So we'll get there. We can't do everything on one day. But that's complete. Almost everything is complete. What's half? You don't do half. Half is right. The best is for God. Why are you giving half? But that's the whole point here. The whole point here is, person, how do you see yourself? And how do you see the reason why I'm giving to somebody else? I'm giving to somebody else because I have to transcend myself to be complete. If I'm locked in my ego, then I'm enslaved. So that's the big idea here. Go ahead. And that's also good marriage advice, by the way. So that was good for Timmy also. Go ahead, Dr. Tamarin.
Rabbi, I'm thinking of what you said about being complete only with another person in terms of the famous children's book by Shel Silverstein, which I'm sure most of the people here are familiar with, called The Missing Piece. A very famous book. And basically, Silverstein's conclusion, which is somewhat different than what you said, but perhaps it isn't when you explain it, is that the missing piece is searching and searching around for something that's missing in yourself, which you have to find in someone else. And his conclusion is you are complete when you accept your imperfections.
That's
Now,
very
how does that fit in with what you're saying?
that's
How does that fit in with
I have to read the book. The only book I read from him is the book about the chopping down the tree. You know that one. That one I didn't like. So I have to read the book. I can't comment without reading the book. But because I can't resist, because I had a friend that used to come to a discussion. There's a heated discussion, and he would show up to the table and he'd say, "What's the topic? I have an opinion." Right? So because I have to have an opinion on everything, so I would say like this: there's one concept which says recognize you're imperfect. Okay, that's nice. It's almost like self-acceptance. And I think that's important and it's very nice. But I think we're saying more than that. It's not that I'm imperfect. The point is not to say that accept that you're not perfect and live happily ever after. The point is it's a path, it's a calling to transcend the self. And of course you're imperfect, but the more you connect to something beyond the self, the more you become whole. So you on your own you're imperfect, but when you connect to others, that's how you grow because you're pushing the limits of your own ego. You're transcending the own ego. By the way, also, spiritually and from the perspective of Judaism, in a way, all souls are one autonomy, we're anatomy. We're all one body. So if you think about it, the Kabbalists say every soul must fulfill all the commandments, but it's impossible to fulfill all the commandments. How could you fill all the commandments? Some commandments are just for men. Some are just for women. Some are just for priests who are from the tribe of Levi. Some are just for kings who are from the tribe of Judah. You cannot be in every box, right? So what does it mean that you can have to fulfill all the commandments? And the answer is, if you're an individual, you can't. But if you see yourself as part of a larger anatomy, which all the souls are interconnected in one anatomy, then when the priest does a mitzvah, he does it for everybody. When the king does a mitzvah, he does it for everybody. When the woman does a mitzvah, she does it for the man. And when the man does a mitzvah, he does it for the woman. And the point here is, but to do that, you have to realize I'm not a complete identity. The problem with complete means closed off. Complete means I'm complete. I'm whole. I'm complete. You can't get in. I can't connect to somebody. I'm closed. It's a closed system. But if I'm 10, I mean, I'm giving it my all. I'm mature. I'm coming to the marriage or to the relationship, and I did everything I can to self-develop. It's not like I'm saying I'm getting married so my wife could raise me. No, I self-develop, but I'm not a closed system. I'm open to realizing that I have to connect to others, and others actually are going to enhance me. So it's not like saying, okay, I'm incomplete, so I'll stay home and I don't have to do anything. This is a calling to connect to others, learn from them, benefit from them, relate to them, transcend the self, transcend the own ego, and that's where you reach completion. So you're not complete alone, but you could be complete, whatever that means, with other people collectively. But the point is, you're not a closed system. It's not like I am here and the limits of my personality and the limits of my perspective are the limits of my reality. That would be, in a way, being trapped. And that's the opposite of freedom. That's being enslaved. And freedom is the ability to say, I'm going to go beyond myself. Okay, let's talk about this a little further because, go ahead. Yeah.
You're thinking about the shekel.
Yeah,
Now, certainly at that point, there was no minting process.
correct.
And Jews didn't have shkelim.
Right.
So I would imagine what they did was take an object that was silver
Right.
and remove from that object the equivalency
Yeah.
of what would be a half.
Correct. And that's why the Torah doesn't just say half shekel. The Torah tells you exactly what it means. It means the weight of silver. So we know they left silver because in those days wealth wasn't stocks or bonds. Wealth was gold or silver vessels. That's when they left Egypt. That's what it says. The Hebrews borrowed from the Egyptians silver vessels, gold vessels, and garments. That's what the economy was, right? That's where. So they didn't have fields, right? They didn't have cattle. Well, they had cattle too, but that's what it says to borrow from the Egyptians, silver vessels. So they certainly had vessels, silver material. But the point is, the Torah tells you the weight. 20 gera is a shekel, and therefore you give 10 gera. So it doesn't have to be minted. It doesn't have to be minted. But when you say shekel, you mean a certain weight. And then if you're giving a half a shekel, you're giving half that weight.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you're the jeweler. So you tell me if I'm sorry. Yeah. You're in the business. What do I know? I don't know. Okay. So what are we saying here? Oh, so this is a very interesting concept, and this I saw the Rebbe talking about this, and I also saw by Jonathan Sachs talking about this. And it's a very interesting concept related to what we're saying now. I'm jumping ahead. It's not really a Passover class. Maybe we'll do a Passover class before Passover. But if I do, I reserve the right to repeat this because this is really beautiful. What happens at the Seder? At the Seder, we say we're about to start the Seder after we make the Kiddush and after we dip, once you start telling the story. So you think about this as a passage that says like this. It says, this is the bread of poverty that our ancestors ate in Egypt. And then we say, whoever's hungry should come join us. Whoever needs to make a Passover offering should come and join us. And then we say, this year we're slaves, next year we're free. That's the introductory paragraph. So everybody talks about this paragraph. And the real question is, why are you inviting people now? Imagine you're at your Seder, you're sitting at the table, you already drank 1 cup of wine, the kids already asked the 4 questions. They didn't ask the 4 questions. You already dipped the vegetable into the salt water. You're like a middle of the Seder. If anyone needs a Seder, they already have a Seder. You should do this 2 months before Passover. Call up all your friends and say, whoever needs a Passover Seder, come to Seder. So obviously this is really an educational point. So what's the educational point? The educational point is, if you want to be free, you have to invite someone to your table. If you think about this, what is freedom? Freedom is, I care about somebody, you have to get out of your own ego. You have to go out of your own perspective. So when we talk about if the concept of now we're enslaved and the process of the Passover Seder is the process of becoming free, so we're telling you, it's not we're inviting people. We already invited the guests. Maybe they came, maybe they didn't. It doesn't matter. You already invited them. But now they may be here, they may not be here. But now you're telling yourself something else. You're telling yourself that the only way to truly be free is if you could connect to somebody else and feel that they're hungry. They feel their pain. Doesn't mean they don't have to be hungry for bread, but they could be hungry for connection. They could be hungry for love. They could be hungry for all kinds of things. But the point is that you have to have that empathy. And if you don't have empathy, then you're not free because you're just locked into your own ego. It's the same theme again and again. So the Passover Seder is about the idea. Once you eat the matzah, and matzah's humility, we'll talk about that also. Matzah's the humility. So once you get beyond that level of the ego, then you say, you touch the matzah, you break the matzah. What's the first thing you say? The moment you break the matzah, you say, whoever's hungry, there must be people hungry. Oh, whoever's hungry, come to my house. Because it's not just an invitation. Maybe you invited them before. It's the idea that you're developing within yourself the empathy for other people. And that's what freedom is. Because the person the other extreme is narcissism. I'm just about myself. So whatever I am, I'm a closed system. If I'm a closed system, I'm locked in my system. So that's the idea here. That talks about, so that we got to that from the idea of, to bring a Pesach offering, it's very likely you're going to have invite your neighbor. But you're not inviting your neighbor because your neighbor needs it. You're inviting your neighbor because you need it in order to transcend. And then I'll say one more thing about that, and then I'll say one more thing about Purim that I really wanted to hold off for a Purim class, but I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it again because I can't hold myself in. It's such a beautiful idea. So first, I'm going to tell you about the Maimonides. Maimonides says like this: there's a mitzvah to be joyous. Now, how do you explain joy? Joy is a tricky business. Simcha, joy. How do you explain joy? What does it mean someone's happy? How do you define happiness? It's like love. There's all kinds of flavors, all kinds of shades. When the Torah says love, what exactly do we mean? When the Torah says happiness, what exactly do you mean? So Maimonides says like this. So on the holidays, it says it's a mitzvah. V'samachta b'chagecha. You should rejoice in your holiday. Says Maimonides as follows. Maimonides says if somebody sits on the holiday and celebrates with themselves and their wife and their children, meaning just their own family unit, and they eat and they drink and they're merry, he says that's not the simcha, that's not the joy that the Torah is talking about. Because he says, you know what it is? It's graphic. He says that's the joy of your stomach. That's just your own physical pleasure. What is joy? To be joyous. Look at the holidays. The Torah always says invite other people less fortunate. The Levite, because in the times of the temple, the Levites had no portion in the land of Israel. So it's an agricultural society. The Levites are basically poor. Invite the Levite. Invite the convert, because convert also has no land in the land of Israel. So the Levite, who's a spiritual convert, who's joined, the widow, the orphan, always says you should rejoice. You, your wife, your son, your daughter, the Levite, the orphan, the Levite, the convert, the orphan, and the widow. And the commentaries point out there's 4 of your own versus 4 of God's. Your own is you, your wife, your son, and your daughter. and God's is the Levite, the convert, the widow, and the orphan. So Maimonides says the only way to be joy is if you invite other people. If you invite other people, you're transcending self, you're connecting to others. That's the joy of the mitzvah. That's the joy of the mitzvah. So it's not about drinking, it's about being joyous. And joy, by the way, what is joy? When a person is sad, they want to stay alone. They want to stay in bed. When you're happy, you almost never want to be happy alone. Pleasure you can do alone, but happiness you almost never want to do alone. You want to go and you want to dance with other people, and you want to sing with other people, and you want to be around other people, and you want to share with other people. Right? So the idea of happiness is that you're flowing outside of self and you're trying to connect to others. Happy people are trying to connect to other people. So that joy is synonymous with breaking out of the ego and connecting to others. What do I want to say about Purim? So I'm thinking about the Megillah, the Scroll of Esther, because we're getting in the mood. It's already 2 weeks before, a little more than 2 weeks before Purim. So I read a commentary on the Megillah that's actually very, very funny. If you read the Scroll of Esther, they have drinking parties all along. They're always drinking. And no serious event in the Scroll of Esther happens without a drinking party. First 2 chapters, there's two parties. One party, Achashverosh has 180 days for his ministers, 180-day party. That's a serious party. After the 180-day party, it's not enough partying. So now he makes a party for all the people of Shushan, not just ministers, but all the people of the capital city. That's another 7 days. And every event is a party. When they decree against the Jews to annihilate the Jews, it's not important. It says, and the king and Haman sit down to drink. They're always drinking. So you could say, without getting, okay, I don't want to say everything I have to say about this, but throughout the story, also at the end, when the Jewish people become victorious, we're also making parties. The whole idea of Purim is defined as Yemei Mishteh V'Simcha, days of drinking and festivities. And even before they set Purim as a holiday, as soon as the news comes that the Jews now have permission to defend themselves, the Jews sit down and have a mishteh, have party. Everybody is partying all day. Now, that led some scholars to think that what the Megillah is saying is that the Jews are just like the Persians. It's trying to show the assimilation. They're just like, it's the same culture. The Persians are drinking all day, and the Jews are drinking all day. That's like a critique. That's what some people read it, but we have a different interpretation, and this is like unbelievably profound. If you look at the Persians drinking, it always says mishteh, always says drinking party. That's all it says. When the Jews drink, it also says the words mishteh, but never alone. It always says drinking party, mishteh, v'simcha, and joy. How do we think about joy? We think about joy as, like Maimonides says, connecting to others. So the first seven drinking parties in the Megillah is people drinking. Why are they drinking? We have no idea. Because they're depressed, because they're sad, because they have no meaning, because they have too much money. It doesn't matter. Nothing spiritual, nothing transcendent. And then the contrast is when the Jews are drinking, it's always drink for joy, for bringing people together, for a festival, for a happy day. And the whole idea of Purim is that it's supposed to connect people. That's why the idea is you have to send gifts of food. Mishloach Manot, it's the only holiday you have to send gifts of food and you have to give charity. It's all about joy for giving, because giving is synonymous with joy. So that's what we're all connecting to. All the theme, we're talking about Passover, we're talking about Purim, it's all the same point. The same point is that the more you're into self, you could be drinking, but it's not going to be a joyous occasion. Joyous occasion is the drink is here to bring people together. And that's what Dr. Tamarin said in the beginning. Is self-indulgence, is it good or bad? The answer is it all depends how you drink. You could be drinking, and it could be drinking like a Persian. I don't mean the Persians today. Persians today are good people. At least some of them. I mean, like the Persians of the Megillah, like the villains of the Megillah. They're drinking. It's a selfish act. It's not an act of transcendence. But when the Jews are drinking, and that's in a way that's the contrast. By saying drink, 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 and all of a sudden you change and you say never. It's clear the first 7 times it's just mishteh, just drink. After the last 3 times when the Jews are doing it, it's going to say mishteh v'simcha. It's a drinking party that has joy. Oh, that's already a different story. So that's the story in short. The more we realize we're half, the more we try to connect to others, the more whole we become. So thank you all for joining, and hope to see you in good health in
Wonderful.
the future. Toda rabah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, as
Thank you.
always.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, everybody have a wonderful day.
See you next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes, that's the plan. Yes.